Hey, what's going on? My name's Robert, and you are watching Southpaw Auto Works. This is the GM Turbo-400. In the last episode, Andy showed what it takes to get the unit torn apart, and in this episode, Andy's going to show what it takes to do an inspection of said unit. Without further ado, let's get this show on the road.
All right, we got her clamped in the vise, so maybe we don't have to fight it so much. We'll get a pick in here, or a screwdriver, or both, whatever it takes. We can get underneath the next spot, and then we can work it around. Okay, keep a hand on this so that it doesn't go flying out on you. Okay. Now this is a tapered snap ring, by the way. Flat side faces down, tapered goes up. And like I said, it's pretty beefy, as you can see I was fighting with it. Okay, let's take this out of the vise, throw it back on the bench. Output shaft comes out pretty simply out the back of the Planetary. Got a Torrington bearing set back here, 3 pieces. And that Planetary simply lifts off of that ring gear itself. Okay. Another Planetary, or another bearing set inside here. We'll talk about that again a little bit later. On the back of the output shaft, the gear that is part of the output shaft is known as the drive gear for the governor. The next one back, which could be metal in this case or plastic, is going to be the drive gear for your speedometer. Get most of it apart. We'll take a look in the 2 clutch packs here. This being your direct third and reverse clutch pack. Looking for the end of the snap ring there. These aren't quite as tough to get out usually. Pop that one out. A quick way, just flip it over and drop it. Okay. Got our set of clutches from that direct clutch pack. Once again, like some of the others in this unit, they look pretty nice. Looks like it was either a rebuilt that sat out in the weather or something, but those clutches definitely have to be replaced no matter what. Once there's water in there, they're junk. So steels, far cheaper time-wise just to buy new steels while you're at it. This one does have a wavy steel at the bottom. It's got a wave to it itself, cushion plate. Both clutch packs should have that in there. The rest of them are flat. Okay, direct clutch pack. There, we'll show you how to take the piston out of there in just a minute. And then our forward clutch pack itself, same thing. Snap ring. Pop that off. In this case, instead of just having a pressure plate, the thick plate that goes on top, this also encompasses a clutch hub itself, which is for the direct clutches. Okay. And the clutch hub itself for the forwards. Washers on either side of that. Could be plastic, could be bronze, just depends. All right. And dump the rest of the clutch pack out. There. Looks like someone has sanded these steels prior. Okay. Like I said, far cheaper time-wise just to buy new ones and put them in there. So wave plate at the bottom. Now we'll take one of the clutch packs over to the press, show you how to compress the springs and remove this snap ring here. Remove the piston, and we'll take the seals out. While we're here, we'll take a quick peek on the back side. Okay, we've got a one-way clutch back here. Okay. That'll need to be addressed when you're into the unit. I just recommend replacing it no matter what. Okay. Got a snap ring to release here. Get that off. The retainer. Rotate the outer race. And there's your sprag, or one-way clutch. All right. 2 different types on this transmission. They used a sprag or a spring and roller type. Depend on the year or make of the vehicle. So, okay, we'll go to the compressor. Compress that, show you how to get the springs and the snap ring off.
Real quick, if this content is adding value, please let us know by hitting that like button. It does help the channel, and we do appreciate it.
We've got our direct drum over here in the press. This is an arbor press we're using to compress the springs, which is a bit overkill, but it does the job. Homemade tool here. Okay, we're going to set down on top of that spring retainer. Try and center that up with the ram on the press. And then we're going to push down on that and try and compress those springs just enough to give us enough to get at that snap ring. We don't want to get carried away and damage the springs itself. What I'm going to do here is try and lock the press to free up my hand. Okay, snap ring pliers in here. We spread that snap ring out, all right? Stuck on the retainer a little bit. Release that snap ring. Then we'll come back here using the press. Release it. Let that back up. Now we got caught in the groove here, so we got to be careful to make sure and release this, not let it get stuck in there. There we go. Back up there. And you've got your retainer and your set of springs. Notice it's missing a spring opposite each other. Perfectly normal on these transmissions. Okay, I've got the springs compressed, snap ring off. There's our spring and retainer. By the way, just for a note, it's going to be the exact same process to take your forward clutch pack apart. It's also the same retainer, snap ring, and springs. So those can be interchanged. Pistons cannot. So we'll just show you the one clutch pack so we don't waste too much time. Get the springs out of here. Okay. Piston will lift right up out of there. If it doesn't, simply flip the drum over and slam her against the bench. Okay. We've got 3 seals to remove, one outer, one inner on the piston, one in the drum. Okay. That's all we're going to do is just peel them off of there. And like I said, exact same procedure for the forward drum, so we won't do that as a repeat. Okay, we're going to do a quick inspection, show you some things to look over on this trans, things to look for, make sure that you know what you need to replace. Obviously, we're doing frictions, we're doing steels. I would recommend a thrust washer kit, replace all your thrust washers, as well as the Torrington bearing kit, also a set of 3 bearings to go in there. Okay, it's kind of a standard thing that I do. Bushings are kind of the same thing. You've got a lot of critical bushings. You've got very heavy rotating components here. The bushings are meant to support those. If they wear, these things wobble, okay, create additional wear and noise. So I recommend putting the bushings in. We'll go over a little bit of that during the rebuild video. Also, while we're here, we want to inspect the pinion gears themselves, okay? And the very first thing that I check on these is for a wobble, making sure I can grab the gear and they do not wobble on the stationary pin that they rotate on. There's a row of needle bearings in there to support each one, okay? So I do a real quick, just make sure it doesn't wobble. They're always going to have a little bit of in play, a little bit of movement front to back there. There's a little tiny thrust washer between the pinion gear and each of the carriers. What we're looking for there is just an excessive amount of movement. These feel pretty good right there. No wobble on the pin. If they wobble on the pin, it's replaced the entire carrier. Okay? These aren't too bad. And then another thing I would do, I would get a flashlight and I would look down at the gear teeth themselves just to make sure I don't have any pitting on the gear face. And what I kind of go as a go, no go, is anything on the gear face itself that a pick or a screwdriver will catch on, if you will. If it'll snag on the surface of the gear because of a pit or a line or a groove, I consider this no good. Okay, they can be rebuilt, but it's not something we would normally do. We just buy a rebuilt or a replacement itself. We would do that on both of the Planets. Once again, checking all the pinions, make sure they don't have too much wobble, too much end play, washers are not hanging out, and then we'll do a final inspection looking at the face of the gear teeth themselves, make sure they're good. We've got another sun gear out of another trans. I wanted to show you what we're talking about as far as looking for damage on the sun gear teeth or pinion teeth when we're inspecting them. Anything that my screwdriver or pick is going to catch in like that, okay, is no good. All right, it's already lost the surface hardness of that gear. It'll just continue to chip or peel or wear. That'll create an issue for us down the road. So this would be something that we would definitely have to replace. couple of wear areas on this transmission, okay? On that direct drum that we were disassembling, we need to look down in the bore here, okay? If you remember, our center support, that rides on there and it rotates. We've got a set of 4 metal rings right here, okay? They may be Teflon, they may be metal, but those can wear a groove into the surface of the drum. So we just very simply run our finger across the drum in several areas, okay, inside that bore. We want to make sure there's no groove worn into that bore itself, okay? That as well as your forward drum, same thing, very small bore, very not so deep, I guess I should say, or shallow bore. 2 rings right in there, and that's the 2 that are on the back side of the pump, or the pump stator itself, okay? Goes in there and he rotates. Those tend to wear, okay? We'll make sure, once again, a pick, your fingernail, whatever, should not catch in a groove where those rings ride. If it will, drum has to be replaced, as well as the rings themselves here on the back of the pump and on the center support both, okay? We're making sure that those are not gouged and the grooves that they go in are not worn excessively. The way I test those is usually with a brand new ring, put it in the groove, test the clearance between the ring and the groove itself, and make sure the rings don't stick in the groove themselves. They've got to rotate freely.
According to my analytics, many of you have not subscribed. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss out on any future videos.
Okay, center support also, we've got a piston right here, retainer and a snap ring. There's some springs underneath this also, not near as large as the springs in the other clutch packs. This you can literally just do with your fingers. It's such light pressure, okay? So I don't usually bother with the press or the snap press or anything. Just push it down with your fingers, release the snap ring, take your retainer off. Notice a little difference on this. You're only going to see 3 springs. That's perfectly normal, okay? Will not have a full set of springs in it. If we can get the piston out of there. Two rubber lip seals there on this particular clutch pack. Those face down into the center support itself. Further inspection, the bushing that's in here, very large bushing. That does a lot of supporting of all the components that are rotating. The main part that goes in there is this sun gear shaft. We're going to check the fit of that bushing by putting the shaft in there, see how much wiggle or wobble we have in there. Okay, that's just an automatic replacement for me. I'm not going to mess with it. I'm just going to put a new bushing in there. All right, pump inspection. We'll look at the pump cover or stator support here. Gonna be looking at the splines here to make sure we don't see a lot of wear there. Okay, not usually a problem on the 400. We're looking at the surface of the pump here, making sure that we don't have any serious scratches or gouges or anything damaged there. You can see some light scratches, some rust from it sitting with the water in it. This would be something that would probably be just fine. We can clean that up with a little bit of cloth. We could run a light file across here, just clean it up. And if you're lucky enough to have a lathe, you could chuck it in a lathe and just kind of polish that surface up a little bit. Okay. Backside, we've got 2 rings here. We'll show you in the build video. What I do is put a new ring in the groove, rotate it around, make sure it's nice and free in there. Doesn't indicate any kind of an issue or damage to that ring land area. The pump body itself, the gears themselves, these are selective by GM. Normally the 400 doesn't have much of a selection to speak of. Okay, GM made pump gears for 350s and 400s the same. They're made in, I don't know, 4 or 5 different thicknesses, 721 to 727, I believe it is. Usually the 400's just going to have the 727 gears in it. Okay, and what we can do there, measure those with a caliper, if we get enough crust off of there and everything. These are measuring pretty close to 727 for a rough measurement as far as thickness. Okay, you can buy these gears new, and I do recommend that you replace them. Once again, just making sure we get the correct thickness. because of the depth of the pump pocket. What we're looking for here, wear on the crescent area where the drive gear may have kind of gouged or worn against this crescent area. This one actually looks pretty nice other than our rust. Also looking for scratches around the outer bore where that driven gear rides. And of course the bushing that's in here, we're automatically just going to replace that. Okay, we don't mess around with that, just replace it. Okay. If you're concerned about the thickness of the gears, the fit, and so forth, like I said, you can do it with a caliper measurement. You can do it with a feeler blade, measuring the clearance from the outer gear to the pocket that it sits in. Okay. You can measure the height of the gears compared to the face of the pump. What you got to have is a decent straight edge. This is a little crude here, Robert's straight edge. Okay, you would put that there. Then you would take a very thin. We've only going down to about 3/1000 on this set. Looks like we'd probably need a little thinner than that to check some of them. You would simply lay the feeler blade down in there, put your straight edge in, and see if you can tug that out of there, if you will. Okay, that'll give you indication there. This is too tight. I'd say we're probably at 2/1000 or less, which is good. I'm sure Robert will give you a spec on that in the video. So like I said, do a set of gears, check your height, check for gouging and stuff inside there, scratches, and of course a new bushing, new seal, and we'll be ready to roll. Also, we want to inspect the pressure regulator valve and boost assembly in here. Going to need the small snap ring pliers in here. We've got quite a bit of spring tension here, so be prepared for that with your thumb, another screwdriver or something there, but just be aware that can come out at you. All right. Going to release that snap ring there, and that is our boost valve and sleeve right here on top. All right. Valve's already fallen out into the bore. There's our pressure regulator spring. Get our pocket screwdriver, get that boost valve out. What we're looking for is wear in the bore of that sleeve where the valve rides. Very common wear area. What I do is take the valve out, flip it around backwards, put it back in there, and then we're going to see if she wiggles in there too much, okay, indicating an excessive amount of wear in that bore. This one actually doesn't feel too bad. I don't know, we'd have to get some good light down in there and look at the bore. Usually you can see a shiny spot if it's worn excessively. But something to look for. A lot of times I just go ahead and put a new boost valve and sleeve in the units while I've got it apart. The pressure regulator spring will also get replaced. That'll be part of the shift kit we'll show you. Okay, freshen that up a little bit. And then lastly, you've got the pressure regulator valve in here. Okay. Take that guy out. It's going to be a spring retainer, just sits on the top there. Okay. Let me show you with the spring on there. It's a spring retainer or spring seat, I guess you would say, there. And normally underneath that, you're going to have at least one of these little horseshoe shims. Okay, if you can see that. Okay, guys used to like to stack those up 2 or 3 or whatever to try and raise the pressure inside the transmission, make them shift harder. Maximum I would ever use would be 1. And then we'll look at the valve and of course clean the rust and stuff off of there and out of the bore. That valve, when it goes back in the bore when we're reassembling, should literally just fall in and out of the bore, indicating that it's clean and it's free and it's working properly. Okay, torque converter, I'm going to recommend you just get a rebuilt to replace it. Okay, this one had water in it. There's no way we're going to get the water out from inside that unit anyway. So we just buy a rebuilt and replace it. Best bet right there. Okay. One last thing, of course, too, inspection of the case. We'll have to wait until we get this all cleaned up. But once all this gasket material is off here, we're going to want to check this surface where the valve body rides, check our bolt holes and our threads to make sure that we don't have any threads stripped out there. And if necessary, you can take a large file and simply run it across this surface, okay, just to kind of address any issues, a little nicks or burrs or whatever, okay, and then inspect it and make sure that we don't have any big gouges or nicks or anything in that surface. Okay, another area to check on the Turbo 400 is where this center support lugs down inside the case is a common wear area, especially on the early units. And where we're looking for wear is down in the case, way down in here. We're going to be looking right on that, right where the pick is. So you've got a cast iron center support resting against that aluminum case, and the action on that center support wants to rock it and move it against that aluminum case. Tends to create a wear pattern down in there, and that can be a problem. A recommendation on this is if you can do it, you get a later center support, which is a thinner lug, and what it'll do is you'll have a very thin metal snap ring that'll go around down in the case, and it'll set down in there, and then the center support will set on top of it, and that eliminates that wear problem with that case getting beat up by the center support.
This show is a ton of hours to produce, and we could really use your help. Believe it or not, there are a number of ways that you can get involved. Check out the video description down below to learn more. We've got a lot more in store for you. That being said, make sure that you subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss out on any upcoming videos. Once again, my name's Robert, and I will see you next time.